Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it is time to have a look at another update 1.91 Devblog, and today it's time to have a look at something British. The Supermarine Swift is coming to the game in update 1.91, not just in one form, but in two. It's coming in the versions of the F.1, which was the first production variant. There wasn't a lot of them made, just less than 20. And then also the F.7, which was the final production variant, where once again, just slightly less than 20 were built. So we're not getting the main production versions of the Swift, but we are getting ones which were kind of the bottom rung of it, and then the top rung of it. And basically meaning that they're going to fill different roles in the game because of the secondary armaments that they're going to have hold of. So the Supermarine Swift has an interesting story behind it. Basically, after World War II, Britain in general was very much broke. There was a lot of issues in the country when it came to money, and also a lot of obligations that had been made to its citizenry to keep them going around in a positive way. What I mean by this is after the First World War, Britain was basically bankrupt and had actually kind of said to all of the people or the heroes who had fought in World War I that they would come home to a hero's welcome. The problem is this didn't happen, and what actually happened was the government failed its citizenry because of the fact that it had effectively run out of money because of the war. And in World War II, they really wanted to make sure that wouldn't happen again. So what they did after World War II is they put a lot of resources towards trying to bring back the soldiers from World War II and give them better living standards than they had before, meaning that a lot of money was put into housing, a lot of money was put into local governments to try and create some economic growth for those areas. And what this meant was, when it came to military budgets and all of this stuff, the British government and also obviously the military arm of it didn't think there was going to be another war for a while, at least 10 years, so they didn't put a lot of R&D into some of the projects that were around at the time, such as the Hunter project and a bunch of different projects that the Supermarine Corporation was working on. So therefore what happened was you had a drought of technology. We as Britain, you had the very successful Meteor jet, and then after that there was a brief period where nothing really happened. And then with the explosion of the Korean War and the worries that the Air Ministry had because of it, then we started getting some more projects. The Hunter project really started taking off. You had the Swift project and the Scimitar project, but the main issue with the Hunter project, which was seen as the one to go for, it wasn't going at a good enough rate. It wasn't going fast enough for the Air Ministry, and therefore they turned towards stuff like the Swift and like the Scimitar to try and bridge the gap between what we saw from World War II and to the 1950s. Unfortunately, stuff like the Swift and the Scimitar didn't really fill these roles very well, and instead what you got was very much stopgap vehicles which were not up to, Kosh. They were very beautiful vehicles. They had a lot of interesting ideas to them which were used in later designs of vehicles, but if we compare them to the vehicles of the time, they were not up to standard, and a lot of them were actually grounded, basically meaning that the pilots and the squadrons that were given them had completely lost confidence in them because of the fact that they either crashed a lot or had a lot of teething problems when they first came out. And these were still not really fixed until the mid versions of the Swift and the Scimitar, in the forms of like the F.4 and F.5. Before then, the squadrons just didn't want to fly these things, which is kind of insane when you think about it. You're given a new batch of fighters and you're like, go and fly these. These are your new ones. And then you go, no, we're sick of crashing. We're sick of the fact that these planes don't stay in the air very well. Now, something I will say is if you ever want to know anything about Supermarine or de Havilland or any of the old companies that aren't around anymore for Britain, a lot of them were eaten by BAE Systems. Now, whether this is a good thing or whether this is a bad thing because of competition reasons, the thing that is really nice nice is the fact that on the BAE Systems website, they have a heritage section where you can go Our Company, go to Heritage, and then what you'll get is this page here, and you can explore the different older businesses, which all now conglomerate under the image of BAE Systems. And obviously Vickers Supermarine was one of those systems. So they have a really nice article on the Swift, they have a really nice article on the Scimitar, and obviously on the de Havilland stuff and the English Electric stuff. It's definitely worth having a look and going through them. I would strongly recommend, if you're interested in British aviation, this is a site to go for, because even though it doesn't give you all the information required about a machine, it gives you a nice little kind of introductory idea to it, and therefore you can expand from there, which is really lovely. So let's talk about, in general terms, how these things are going to work in game. So we have the Swift F.1 and the F.7. The main difference that's going to come into game is the F.1 should be able to go a max speed of about 1108 kilometers an hour, and of course it has the two 30mm ADENs on it, which is always really nice. It should also be able to carry rockets and bombs, but not missiles, so make sure to understand that. When it comes to the F.7 though, the F.7 is the last modification of the vehicle. It had an afterburner attached to it, and it was able to go 1,112 kilometers an hour with its better engines, the Avon 116s. So from the two separate parts, you're getting around about 4 kilometers an hour more out of the F.7 version compared to the F.1. So we're not talking about a massive performance difference with these two aircraft. Instead, what we're seeing is a difference in armament. So with the F.1, you are going to be much more of a multi-role fighter, which is something that was learnt from stuff like the Scimitar and also the Swift, that this multi-role idea is generally a good idea, but you should probably push it towards, one of the sides. And the thing is, with the AP rockets that it's going to have, with the bombs that it will also be able to carry, as you can see here, it will be very useful in the ground realistic sense. The main difference between the F1 and F7 is the F7 gets access to Fireflash missiles. Now, if you are a fan of the ASRAMs that you see on the Hunter F6, these missiles are completely different to them. They're much more like the Firestreaks that you have on the Javelin. So they will go long distance, but they're not going to turn very hard. So from actual air-to-air combat, these AAMs I don't think are actually going to be that useful. What is kind of odd though is the F7, it says here, should be fit with a pair of Ferry Fireflash air-to-air missiles. It should technically carry 4 of them overall, and this is seen by the picture that you can see here, where it does have access to 4 of them on the prototype of the F7. So with that said, it is a nice little bit of history that we're getting added to the game, because this was the first British air-to-air missile which was ever actually mounted on a plane and used. So even from that point of view, that is kind of nice. Does that mean that this machine is going to take over the game, though? Probably not. I mean, the fact it has two 30mm is really nice. It should be incredibly flexible as well as it flies, meaning that, it should turn very well and it should move very well when it comes to its back end. It to me feels very much like a Meteor would when, you have it in game. The Meteor is incredibly maneuverable in the game. It has good firepower, but the problem that it lacks of, and if people pick this up, the problem where it lacks is its speed. So if you can beat it on speed and setting up, the Swift won't really be able to do a lot against you, and because of the fact that you have other nations at similar BRs which are going to have, better missiles than you, better speed than you, and equal weaponry, I'm kind of worried about the Swift in an aerialistic sense. Unless this thing comes out at like 7.0 or 7.7, which I highly doubt. I'll be incredibly surprised if this isn't an 8.7, 8.3 machine. I don't think it goes anywhere near higher than that. And if it does go anywhere near higher than that, there is no reason to take this over like a Hunter. So instead, what you're going to have is two variants of the Swift plane, which are going to be relegated to ground realistic. And I do think they do have a place in ground realistic, especially the F.1. The fact that it does have a lot of AP rockets on it and bombs means that you can play this multi-role superiority fighter. If it is, or if it does what it should do, which is be quite maneuverable in the air, you should be able to use it as this pseudo multi-role aircraft where you can control the airspace, go after helicopters, go after other jets, and, control them. And at the same time, you're able to use your bombs and use your rockets quite effectively. You will be in a nice stead with it. The only issue is obviously radar-guided AA is going to shoot you down quite a lot, so you're going to have to get used to that. But overall, I think in that setting, it would do pretty well. The lineup used around it, though, might be a bit of an issue. Like, if this thing's at 8.7, what do you run with it? Like the Chieftain Mark V, the Warrior, maybe the Striker? I mean, it's not looking great, but I suppose if you want to get into it, using the Warrior and then going forward with that, it could work pretty well. At least you could build some form of lineup around it. I don't really put any stock into these Fairy Fireflash air-to-air missiles, though, just because of looking at their statistics. I don't think they come anywhere close to the ones which are viable in the game right now. And instead, the only way that they're going to be useful is if somebody tries to boom you, and when they're zooming away, you lock on and fire the missile, which can, actually work pretty well, because you're going to be defensively flying a lot of the time in this thing, because of the fact that it's going to be slower than a lot of vehicles that you face. I am personally looking forward to the Swift, especially both of these variants that are coming into the game. I just wish that the Scimitar was thought of, because that also is another, vehicle that would be nice. It's another subsonic aircraft, though, the Swift, just like the Scimitar, and also stuff like the Folland Gnat, which hopefully we see soon, and the Javelin. And so far, what we've seen with these vehicles which have been added to the game, apart from the F.6, which is saved by its SRAMs, all of the other vehicles which are around this speed, they're okay until Big Daddy comes along in the form of a Mach 1 capable aircraft, and they can't really do a lot. So even though I'm happy to see it, even though I do think both of these variants will do great in ground realistic as a pseudo superiority fighter, at the same time, in aerialistic, which is its main game mode, I don't really see the point in using any of these things, just like I don't really see the point in using something like a Javelin, because it's going to get eaten by stuff which is just either faster or more maneuverable. We'll see how it goes, though. I'm happy to see two versions. Now next, as I said, it has to be the Scimitar. Hopefully we see the Scimitar, and then the Gnat, and then maybe the Lightning, just to have a bit of fun with. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and Elove Goats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.